Todd, can you hear us?
It's coming up right now.
Yeah.
And hopefully you're starting to see a PowerPoint slide. It looks like we're coming up, so I'll put it into screen mode here. And just move that to the side. Okay, well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. Thanks, Thomas, for the introduction, and I'll spend a bit of time explaining my background because most people haven't heard a title of VP of Value before. So I'll talk about what my background is and how I think it's applicable to other business-to-business environments. There's also a bunch of business-to-consumer examples that are occurring in the same space, but because of time, we don't have it to go through. So my background, big industrial company, SKF, and it was decided if you spend all this time and money creating something of value, engineering something of value, and remember value being something your customers appreciate and find it of value, how do you make sure you are compensated for that, get paid for that value? And in the industrial marketplace, our experience, and globally, was the rise of procurement. So the technical buyer, the technical user, might decide what they want, but at some point procurement got involved and started to challenge why they were paying a higher price for something when there was another version that looked the same or was almost as good at a lower price point. So he said, okay, if we spend this money, maybe we need to do a better job of getting that message to the marketplace. So, that was kind of my job there. Now I'm with a bigger industrial company called ABB, and they've got a new offering coming to the market. And really what I'm tasked with, what is the value of that offering for the customer? How do we drive more profit for them? And you'll see me use the term profit throughout by reducing their costs, but also by increasing their revenue or their top line. How do we make customers more profitable? What type of business relationships could we have with them? Business structures around value where they get more profit immediately and we work together to drive out the right cost, etc. So I start, the presentation has, in the middle bold there, it says it starts with creating customer value. And again, it's important to have the engineers or the technical people sitting somewhere, but, really creating something that's of tangible value for the customer. And once you do that, all the research shows that if you can calculate or quantify value, customers' willingness to pay and customers' ability to pay go up. Very pricing-oriented terms that I've learned over the years, but ability to pay means I've got only so many dollars in my budget or available. Do I have the money to buy this? And an old CEO that I knew very well said, you want to know what? Budgets are made to be moved and changed. If I get an offer from a supplier that can create more profit for me and it meets my criteria, I believe that it will actually happen, it gets prioritized much higher in my list. I have all these competing people asking for money. It moves up the list for sure if it's quantifiable and believable. And two, I'll go borrow the money if I have to. I'll go to the bank, I'll go to the shareholders. Whoever has the best business case wins. So you've created value, now you've invested in a tool and a methodology to quantify or calculate it. Then the next part is during your sales and marketing processes, are you communicating what that value is to your customer? And again, you've got the user of your product, which actually receives the value, but there's other people involved. One piece of research recently I saw from the corporate executive board that there's almost 6 decision makers in a buying community now making decisions. So you've got finance and technical and procurement and all these different people. So are we hitting the right buttons with all those people and communicating the message in a methodology they can understand? And then I used to say capture value. If you create value and you do the work for the value, you need to get paid for that value. But you'll see the slide's been changed to have the words profiting from value. And the reason why a professor from Kellogg, Jim Anderson, Value Merchants was a piece of research they released a decade ago, I'd say. But, a guru in this area goes, Todd, think of the word capture. You're actually reinforcing procurement's mindset that whenever a supplier increases its price, they lose. It's a zero-sum game. You're capturing part of the value from them. And I said, well, wait a minute. He goes, actually, you're profiting. The supplier and the buyer can both make more money, not by one party losing from the other, but by taking out wasted cost or increasing greater value. You'll see the term total profit added. It kind of came a few years ago when I used to talk a lot about total cost of ownership, and I'll walk through a model of what that looks like. And then I would say that makes sense, but we need to look at the upside in these other areas. And really, if a customer's goal is to be more profitable, costs are part of driving profit, but so is revenue. By definition, the actual definition, increased revenue, throughput, quality, wouldn't actually be calculated in total cost of ownership. So a few procurement professors actually suggested, you want to know what? I think there's enough change in the model. We should start talking about how do we affect our customers' total profit, cost, and revenue. On the right-hand side, you'll see a book that's 6 months released into the marketplace, and that I think is a great simple read in the sense it's got about 10 big companies talking about their value journey and what worked and what didn't work, and how do they get the culture throughout their organization and get adoption and get customers to want to think differently. But I think just as importantly, it also references from the buying side. So there's 4 or 5 procurement experts, academic, but also procurement consultants. One gentleman who used to run Ernst & Young and KPMG's procurement strategy saying, suppliers, if you can come to us at the right time with the right business case and engage us, we're willing to pay for it. So a lot of my examples come from this and my experience around that. I start off every presentation making sure that people are using the right terms. And I'm amazed at how often people transpose these terms, not only in Canada, my homeland, but in every country of the world. Price is not the same as cost, which is not the same as value. They're all 5-letter words, at least in the English language, but they're not the same. Price is what you pay for something, 100 euros, 1,000 euros, whatever. And people make the assumption that that's the number they should focus on. Well, cost is price plus and minus costs associated with it. What's my financing cost? Do I have to pay shipping to have it sent to my house? Does it use other costs like energy or lubrication or water or ink or whatever? All these types of things. So, price is what you pay, but cost includes price, but is all those other things. And then again, value. Can I reduce my risk? Can I have more throughput? And people make the assumption that if they pay less, the price goes down, their costs will go down. The term ceteris paribus is a Latin saying all things being equal. And even if it's the same laptop, the same product, doesn't mean the value in use will be the same. A lot of value is actually created by using the product differently, be trained how to use it properly. I saw a study once that says people only know how to use their smartphone 10%. 90% of the ability within the phone people still don't know how to use. I think my kids know how to use it more than I do, but there's a lot of extra value there that's not being realized within products or services. So why should customers assume that a price savings becomes a cost savings? And not to be arrogant, but if a customer says, your price is too high or we need a price savings, I think if you're comfortable to come back and say, just to be clear, do you need a cost savings or a price savings? If they say price, I start to challenge them. You want everything to go down as a whole. I mean, if your price goes down 10%, but your costs go up 15%, you're actually worse off. So usually I get the response, well, that's what I meant. Okay, just wanted to clarify. Now here's how we measure cost. Here's how I walk my product or service through your life cycle. And here's all the different things that we can measure and affect by working together. So look at your own marketing material. I saw one company that had 65 external pieces of Marcom material that used the wrong term. I could be the highest price but the lowest cost. 2 different things. The Priceberg, a great gentleman I know that put this together, and it's a great visual. I didn't say, but I spend a third of my time at procurement conferences having the same discussion, how to buy value. And this is one of the slides that procurement always wants. But what it's trying to get across is just because you can see the price, that's not maybe where you should focus. And what everybody on the call does to add value around their product or service will be different. But below is what in the industrial market makes sense. I have a feeling in most industries, how long will it last? How much energy does it use? Does it affect downtime or uptime? the customer experience. Again, those might be different, but it's our job to identify what those are and then put possible and ranges of impact associated with it. I would argue that I don't really care where the waterline is. It's whoever's got the smallest price berg wins. Stop looking at the small part, start looking at the big part. And again, total profit added is a summation of all those things, where total cost of ownership would only look at a few of those. And, this we could spend a whole day on discussing, where are the different value and cost impacts of your product or service for the buyer, for the user in different markets. But let me quickly go through the model, and it's something you hopefully can take away and put on a whiteboard somewhere and say, okay, let's just start thinking through this. Walk the life of your product or service and see where the costs and benefits are. So in my world, somebody, OEM, takes a bunch of things and puts it together and makes something. So they take a bunch of parts and make a big machine. They take a bunch of software and make a computer or service. They're a drug company. They take a bunch of chemicals and put it together to make a pill that helps stop a disease. So these people have a bunch of research people sitting in a room saying, okay, what does the market want? What price point are they willing to pay for it? And how do I design and build something to meet that requirement? So industrial, but again, it's applicable to anything. They're going to make trade-offs. Robustness. If you said to a bunch of engineers, I want that washing machine to last 1,000 years, they could do it. They would over-engineer it, make it out of titanium and diamonds or something, but they're making trade-offs. This machine should last 15 years or whatever number. They will make a decision, and then they'll make trade-offs. How easy will it be to manufacture? Can we put kits and part them together, or am I designing in a lot of costs that I don't need? And they'll make tolerance change-offs. And I mean, again, it'll be different if you're the person building this or you're selling to the person that's building it. But the things that are underlying actually weren't included in total cost of ownership. That's why I've added this term total profit. What if you could add something of difference to your customer's machine they're building that helps them sell more because it's different, or increase the margin that they can sell it at? As a salesperson, most people on the phone hopefully agree that if I just had something that was different that my customer valued, maybe my machine uses less water. Maybe when it's going to fail, it shuts down before it breaks, so I don't have all these extra costs. So really getting to the sales and marketing people of the OEM that's building something and saying, let me help you build something that's worth more to your customers, not build something good enough and cheaper. So somebody builds something, and the next phase is usually the acquisition phase. Procurement is requested by somebody to sit down and buy 1,000 something, company cars, computers, machines, whatever it is, and they're tasked to look and see what is the need of the business, who meets the minimum requirements of that, and they go through the acquisition phase. And quick story here, in my old world, I started to do some work with our procurement team, and their point to me was, we already buy on total cost of ownership. And I said, great, what's the calculations we use? What do we value? What do we not value? How do we prioritize these things, etc.? And when I challenged them a little bit, these were the types of things that we were measuring. Terms and conditions. What's the price? What's the shipping cost? What's the currency cost? Is there taxation implications? Is there a minimum order quantity? Is there a return policy? Just to give you an example. And the reason why I mention this is your customers might start using, a lot of them I hear because of being out with them or the consultants are listening to, they use the term we buy on total cost of ownership. But when you ask them what do you measure, I find most of them measure total cost of acquisition, which I'll show you in a minute, is usually a very small component of total value. So somebody built it, procurement's been asked to buy it on behalf of the business. Now they've bought the 1,000, whatever they're buying. And at this point, things get installed, operated, and maintained. You buy a car. You buy it, you use it, you maintain it. You buy a gearbox. Whatever, it kind of goes through these phases. Now somebody else is now using the machine. and getting the value out of that computer, that machine, whatever it is. And this will be different for everybody on the line, but in use, what are the costs associated with the machine? Does it use energy, water, lubrication, the OPEX side of the business? How long should it last? Great question is, what's the cost to repair that machine? One, can I predict when the machine will fail and shut it down before it fails? A lot of studies show that it's 90% cheaper to fix it that way. You don't have consequential damage, rush shipment of parts and people. And to be honest, there are some OEMs that will give away their machines at no margin, low margin, all with the hope of making it up in the service contract. Making it up in the service contract. So let's look at that and see where those costs and benefits are. Is what you're doing affecting the customer's production, their throughput, their output, and the quality of what they make? And can they sell it at what margin and what profit? Again, total profit addresses these things, total cost didn't. I won't go through all these, but you can start looking through some of the different costs and benefits of what your system's using, and then eventually you dispose, or your customer disposes of what they've bought. The existing literature, academic-wise, never looked at this because it's the throwaway society. There's no cost to throwing it away. It goes into the garbage and away it goes. And I started looking at this because lubrication people were telling me it's a rule of thumb, so it's different for every industry, etc. But the cost to dispose of used lubricant is 2.5 times the price to buy it. You have all these government requirements. You have to pay somebody to come in and take it away to recycle it. Whoa, if I would have known that, maybe during the acquisition phase, I would have looked at buying a machine that didn't need lubrication. You can do that. Or put a system on it that had no excess. So, or sometimes there's actually value in the asset. You bought a very good car, a high quality car that's engineered very well. It has a resale value in 5 years. It's depreciated slower. So yes, the acquisition price might be higher, but its cost is lower because it has a residual value much higher. So I was saying to Thomas before, in October, we're going to run a few exercises around this, and just to try to get people to walk through and start to think through the logic of where these things are. And then you start to say, where are the biggest impacts? And you can see the diagram in the bottom left that usually the big numbers in the operation phase. Now the question is, where can we find numbers to start that discussion? One, you can walk the life of your product. You can start asking some questions. You can talk to your industry experts that really understand an industry. Or you can just start doing some research. It's not as hard as you might think. It's got to start somewhere. And the final build right there was the OEM, the person that builds the product or service, builds in all those costs. How should it be maintained? When will it fail? How will it fail, most likely? These types of things. So it's important to help them create something that's better and then get that value by showing their customers there's something of difference. And again, lots of data here, but one of my favorite pieces is a decade old. It was done by Accenture, so one of the big global consulting organizations. And again, it's amazing what you can find with a little bit of research. This worked very well with my last company and my new company. These are industries they sell to. And what Accenture is looking at is what's the initial purchase price of an asset and what's its operating cost and disposal cost. So the red bar is the initial purchase price, and the gold color is the OPEX cost, if you look back at the slide previously. So commercial aircraft, if you're buying a Boeing versus an Airbus, as an example, that represents only 8% of the cost. 92% of it occurs during usage. Fuel being the biggest one, but maintenance being number 2 usually, and labor number 3. All those can be affected if you can standardize on parts, if you can build it lighter, if you can build it more efficient, if you can reduce the repair intervals, if you can reduce the types of variances and parts to be used. Class 8 trucks, Scania, Mack, the big 18-wheelers that you see, that represents only 11%. Industrial equipment, gearboxes, fans, motors, 12%. And the light-duty pickup trucks, these are for work vehicles, not for personal vehicles, so it includes the labor cost of having somebody drive it. But what I found is that my past company, when they bought, and a lot of my customers when they bought, they would focus on that red bar all day long. And they'd say, you wonder what, if we could buy this for 10% cheaper, that's huge. it's a big number. You know, if you're buying 1,000 machines and at X dollars and you can save 10%, that's huge. And then the question I ask is, you know, maybe you should buy the machine for 10% more, but have it have 2% less operating costs. Some quick math. So 10% of 12 is a 1.2% of the total. A 2% change in the operational effectiveness of it, 0.88 plus 0.88 is 1.76. Actually, that'd be 50% more impactful for you, Mr. Customer, to buy a better machine that has less operating costs, that fails less often, that's cheaper to fix because the parts are available, whatever those reasons are. People are looking at the wrong side of the equation. So there's a lot of research out there, and even if it was 14, you know, which is a huge difference, 12 to 14 is a big 15% difference. It starts to put that mindset that says, have I even looked at these? And the comment I get from most procurement people is, we assumed all the operating costs were the same. Sometimes they're close enough, but most of the time they're not. This is a very interesting slide. This Rob McGuire on the bottom left, you see his logo. He's a procurement expert. He wrote a chapter for the book, if you get the book, you have to read that chapter. It's just so amazing to hear from a procurement person. How does he think? Some funny sales stories in there. But he says, you need to understand how I buy, because then you can understand when you can affect my buying criteria. And when he drew this out once, I went, wow, that makes so much sense in my personal life even. So really quickly, a need's identified. You need a new family car. The other one broke or needed to be a new one. So a need's been identified. And I'm not saying this is a rational process, but it's the process that most people follow. And then you kind of think, you know, what do I need? Do I want a big American SUV or a small car? Do I want a gas car, an electric car? Now, I'm not saying that these are, you know, you might have chose gas or diesel. You know, once you've kind of made that decision, it's tough. You're not even looking at the other options in there. So you made a specification. Which suppliers would you even talk to that could meet this criteria? You know, I've had bad experience with those people, or these 5 brands all produce something, so I'm going to do some research on these people. Then you send out an RFI, RFQ. You know, you people meet my requirements. You know, what would be your bid to deliver what I need that meets these criteria? Us salespeople do a lot of work, you know, putting together these very detailed proposals of how we'll do it. The customer receives them. They then choose 2 or 3, whatever. They choose a few suppliers to negotiate terms and conditions. They make a selection of 1 or 2, and then hopefully they measure, did that supplier do what they said they were going to do? Even in your personal life, I bought this car. Is it doing what I wanted it to do? If not, I won't buy it again, or I'll sell it. So when I looked at this, and you know, it's tough to do polling questions, but you know, I went, wow, that makes so much sense. And he goes, remember though, this is when you as a salesperson and a marketing person has the ability to influence my specification. Because once I've decided I'm buying a gas 4-door car from an American company, and I'm not saying that's right, but once I've decided that, you're going to have a real tough time getting me to change. You're telling me I'm wrong in what I've decided. I'm already invested personally with it. I've already told other people what I'm going to do. I don't believe you because you're trying to change my mind. You've got to come to me before I've decided what I want. And I just think back, like, okay, how much time do you as a sales organization and marketing get the information to your customers really early to get them to think about it? The next time I'm buying whatever I'm buying, maybe I should think of this, this, and this. So when potential suppliers are chosen, they're being chosen on total cost, as an example, or they're being chosen on something different. You know, a lot of the big consulting firms spend 30 to 40% of their research money and time talking to people at the right level before the need's even been identified, because they can frame the specification. Have you thought of this? Take this into consideration. Watch out for these risks. And I think we all know once you're in the buying process farther along, you don't want to be talking bad about your competition and these things. So, again, I think it's a great visual takeaway. This is a great, I met this lady, 8 years ago maybe, Huthwaite International Sales Organization company, global, put on a really interesting conference in London. In the morning was procurement people speaking, how do we buy? In the afternoon was salespeople saying, how do we effectively negotiate, communicate, and work with? And you can read it, but This lady's now the head of the Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply in the UK. And she said, your suppliers don't come to us with a business case. It's what I need. Not just what I want, it's what I need. If I'm not going to buy the lowest price one, I need something to justify it. I mean, you better sell your value to us using our numbers. You can start with industry benchmarks or reasonable estimations. Then the customer can modify and change. One takeaway there is asking a lot of open-ended questions might not get you the data you need. Customers might go, whoa, I don't know that. They might get confused. They might not know it, to be honest. So saying, on average, we think it's $3,000. Okay, people, higher, lower, sounds reasonable. And my favorite part, and I will read it, if you can't quantify your value, don't be surprised at the failure of procurement to do so. And so many salespeople, well, we can't quantify it. Yes, you can. It takes some work. It takes some effort, these things. But this person, that's the buyer, they have to source 5 different categories, 20 different categories. This is all you do. You only sell this. And if you can't do it, how am I supposed to figure out what your value is? So, again, from a procurement perspective, one of my favorite pieces of research came from a North American organization called MAPI, Manufacturers Alliance for Productivity and Innovation. And I probably have 20 examples of this, but this is a very poignant one. And it asked 120, I think it was, chief procurement officers the question, do you have a structured methodology, structured to choose suppliers on best value using total cost of ownership? And actually, when I look back at the questions we asked, it was really total profit added. We talked about recycling cost. We talked about, production improvements. The biggest takeaway from this is they entered into more pay-for-performance agreements, et cetera, but the companies that did this were 35% more profitable than the companies that didn't have a structured methodology. Where everybody had their own spreadsheet, everybody was buying on price, landed cost. By changing the way you buy, by extracting value from your suppliers, you can increase your company, this is for publicly traded companies, by 35%. That's everything. Stop hammering me for that price reduction that doesn't make you more profitable, because those price savings never get to the bottom line. So a lot of research around, helping procurement think differently. I don't, at the beginning, I don't think I had the slide in there just to let you mean a person that runs the biggest pricing society in the world, marketing and key accounts, SAMA, said, this is the right way. This is what we have to do as businesses. But having procurement say, you want to know what? We need to think differently. And again, you as a salesperson going in and saying, procurement, you're wrong, probably won't work. Helping them come to your conclusion that there's a better way to do business, they will come to that conclusion if you go where they think, where they read, to the people that they trust, and they say, wait a minute, I'm using this just as an example because I've heard it used before that, office supplies, what a commodity. It's papers and pens. You want to know what? I bet there's an office supply company that could add a lot of value around what they bring. Maybe it's not the pen or pencil, but everything else. So challenging that customer to think differently about what you're buying or what they're buying from you. So a summation kind of on that. So, these are organizations that I built a relationship with over 15 years. On the far left, you've got sales and pricing, saying this makes sense. So Kellogg, Jim Anderson was around the industrial marketing, London Business School, and Assad in Spain are around value pricing. IMD is out of Switzerland, very well known for global industrial marketing, but they've also the biggest procurement school in Europe. Carlos Gordon runs a Chief Procurement Officer Summit every year. He uses half my slides, and I've been over to present I don't know how many times. So professional procurement's starting to get it. University of Tennessee is American. I think at the end have some visuals of some white papers, but they've done a lot of work, what they call vested sourcing, choosing on best value. The paper is available for download. It's based on a Nobel Economics Prize winner from 2009 around choosing suppliers based on best value. So we rewrote a small version of that. And yeah, you'll get a copy of it or you can see the link. These are procurement organizations that had me come speak. The first one's government, National Institute of Government Procurement, very North American, but there was European people over. PASIA was Asia. IBE Corp was Latin America, Logi was Finland, IACCM is global. The point is, it's not a North American idea or a Western European idea. Most people are starting to think through. Governments are actually changing their rules. The Scottish government has been held up as one of the best in the world, saying we have to buy best value. We have to agree what best value is, but that's not the same as lowest price, which is a whole different mindset. There's an example or two in the paper, but you have to define what value is, operating cost, aesthetics, whatever that is. But having they weren't getting the best value from their suppliers by 3 bids in the lowest price. And on the far right, some of the big consultants, that said, okay, once you understand your spend, you know what your spend is, you've consolidated your spend, you've rationalized it a little bit. Okay, now it's time to extract value from your suppliers. That's where the real value will come from. Nestle did a piece of research that showed that, and they spend a lot of money, the food company, on research and development. But if they could get their suppliers to focus their R&D towards joint projects with Nestle, co-creation of value, they could get a 25 times more research and development dollars just by saying to suppliers, we'll choose the ones that bring us the most value, we'll reward the ones that bring us the value, let's work together to find and create that value. And just the last comment here, I always love colleagues who would say, send me the slides you use at a procurement conference, not the sales version. And I look at them, I'm not joking, the similarities are just astounding. It's not a separate message. We need to sell value and measure it. They need to buy value and measure it. And we need to pay each other based on value creation. So it's not two different versions. We might even have procurement people on the line right now. So I hope they are. So once you create value, some different value pricing models. So, the visual you see there, that SKF Document Solutions, was the tool that SKF uses to quantify customer value. So if you've got a new product that's coming to market, it's in the stage of development somewhere, hopefully early on, you say, if we built something that did X, what would that be worth to the customer? If I make the machine that we build use 5% less energy or last 10% longer or use up 5% less space, what would that be worth? Now, the value will be different for everybody, by region of the world, by industry, by how they operate. So you're going to get a lot of little points, $18, $12, or whatever. You'll start to get a range where a lot of people lie. And you say, we can't price it so everybody gets greater value from it. But, whoa, a lot of the ranges are in that 14 to 16, so we'll say around the $15. Then you ask yourself, what's my production cost? And I'll stop here. Most industrial companies do cost-plus pricing, or competition-based pricing. What's the cost? What's my minimum margin? There's the price. The customer doesn't care what your costs are and what your minimum margin is. You need to make money. I'm not saying we shouldn't go back to that to vet. Is this good business sense? But what's the value for the customer? What's my cost to produce? If there's a magnitude of difference there, you should move forward. If your cost to produce is greater than the customer value, stop. It's worthless. Maybe invest the money of creating something better or find new value for the customer. But, too often I see products and services get to the market where the sell price is higher than the value. Then you're stuck with doing two things, dropping the price till it gets below the value or finding ways to add more free services to get the value up. So during your development process, ask yourself these questions and be honest with yourself. Now, in this example, there's a multitude, a factor of 5-something times to move forward. The sell price, and this is interesting, some sales books talk that the sales price should be at the maximum point of where the customer value is. I disagree, and in my personal experience of how I think, you're actually incentivizing the customer not to buy your product or service. Give me a second here. So in this case, I'm setting a price that's below the value for most customers. The difference between the sell price and the value perceived, there's actually a term for it called the value surplus. I'm paying you $11.75, but I perceive the value to be $15. I'm getting a return. This is a good investment. If I was to charge them the $15, they might buy it once, but then you've incentivized them to go out and buy something differently. Real quick example, travel internationally a lot, And I find that I would always grab a soda in the hotel fridge. And in one country, well, Sweden, the price became just ridiculous. When you did the conversion, you said, really? 35 SEK, which is $6 for a soda. Whoa, that's just, I mean, wow. Guess what? You've now incentivized me to walk to the corner store and buy a soda for each day that I'm going to be in the hotel room, 5 of them, and I just saved how much? So you might have got me once, but now you've incentivized me to change my behavior. I don't know what the exact number would be. Let's just use American dollars to keep it simple. If it was $1 in the store and it was $2 in the fridge, I probably would do it. The incentive isn't great enough for me to walk across, go through all the expense account problems. So, don't try to extract every last cent. But here's what becomes important. The customer perceived a value of $15. Maybe when you work with them, they can extract more value out of it, how they install it, how they use it. That was their perception. Maybe when you measure it, you find out that it actually creates $23 of value for them. So either having the customer realize more value by using it differently, or showing them using their own numbers that the value is actually higher. You can increase your price as long as the value increases at the same ratio or higher. And of course, you want to take cost out, but this is the value pricing model with new product that you should, or service. I say product, but service works also, that you should be thinking through. When we get a chance, there's a bunch of different value pricing models today. Pay for performance, there's a lot of research, is going to increase. Results-based, value-based, because customers have taken a lot of risk, made a lot of assumptions that value will be realized, and haven't received it. And they're saying, you want to know what? I'll pay when it's actually realized. So again, and you're seeing it in the consumer world, the Uberization of the consumer world, where prices are different based on the demand, usage, and value received. This is a study done by a group called Monitor, a pricing consultancy. They're now part of Deloitte, the bigger consultancy for the last 5 years. But here's the takeaway to your boss of why do I need to invest in getting better value pricing in doing this. So what Monitor did was they took a look at different industries, because it's only fair to compare you to people within your own industry, like for like. So pharmaceutical, industrial, consumer, whatever it is. They said the average profit of that industry is 1. So we're comparing apples to apples. And at the time, they said, who's taking a value-based pricing approach versus a market share volume approach? And on further discussion with them, they agree. I mean, value-based pricing only occurs once you have all those other blocks there. But the companies that were really good at it, that had the right tools, the technique, the people, the motivation, all these other things, were 24% more profitable than their industry average. Funny enough, people that took the strategy and didn't even do it well were 4% more profitable, which usually takes a while to get a chuckle from the audience, but the people that are really good, strong execution, and make it up in volume were the least profitable, 9% less profitable than the industry average. The people that said, let's make it up in volume and didn't do that well were even more profitable than the ones that did it well. The difference between, the volume best guy and the value best guy, the 0.91 to the 1.24, 35%. Somewhat similar to the procurement slide I showed a few ago, that, there's a 35% profit impact by changing the way you buy or changing the way you sell, not at the other person's expense, but finding true value in delivering it. And I think this is kind of a neat takeaway. So just spending a lot of time with some of these value experts, putting this book together and doing some other things, the question came out, a lot of companies have at least strategically said they want to take a value strategy to the market. Very important. And the question was, how come most of these people, on retrospect, when you talk to them, aren't obtaining the full results they wanted? So this is based on Jim's experience and mine in the marketplace. And he goes, I think the reason is people spend too much time on the ability to sell value. They say we have value in our new product offering and our new services. We conceptualize value. We've added it to our selling process. There's a box to be ticked in our CRM system, our Salesforce, our Siebel. We've built a calculator in Excel, whatever. We've got a calculator. And we did a rollout training. 2 hours was allocated at a sales meeting. So I've told you we have value. I've told you to do it. I've given you a calculator and I trained you. Go do it. And, maybe there's resistance, maybe there's excitement, I don't know. But his point was the companies that have really got the real big bang for the buck are the ones that make it an ongoing culture change project, not a flavor of the month at one time. So it's ongoing. It's part of the monthly meetings. It's part of the coaching system. Are the salespeople compensated on value, profit, or on volume? In a lot of industries, publicly traded, you cut a price by 5%, that's half the profit. If you could increase your effective price by 1%, it's everything. One great comment my old CEO said to me, he goes, how many ways do you think we have to cut a price? I've heard so many creative ways by every salesperson. It's a new market, it's a competitor, it's Friday, it's a big order. He goes, the creativity that goes into justifying a price decrease is amazing, but how many ways have I given my customer value buying options that say the initial price might be higher, but I'm willing to stand up and have a process to guarantee it for you? Maybe my effort's in the wrong spot. So if your boss says, well, we can't guarantee value, well then, maybe you should invest in finding a way to do that, because if you have ways to cut prices, maybe you should have ways to guarantee value. Like I said, every point of discount is just a huge impact. Your business culture, is it part of overall? And I look at, companies, culture change projects. They're ongoing, they're updated, they have a driving force, they're full-time people focused on it. So any company that's done a Six Sigma approach, when they have those people in that structure, it lives. If it's a one shot and done, it dies. And I think the value strategy is the same way. And then finally, the customer culture, where I spend a lot of my time trying to get to the customers way ahead of the buying decision and saying, wait a minute, how am I thinking of what value is? What supplier can deliver that value? How would we measure it? Again, getting them earlier in the buying process so they're more excited to have a different discussion. I would love to have the discussion, and you never know, I might have competitors on the phone right now. Who brings the best value? How will it be realized? That's where we should be fighting it out in the marketplace, not who can deliver something almost as good for a little bit lower price. So, stole this, slide. Price is only an issue in the absence of value, but all the research shows that if that value needs to be quantified to start the discussion. And I'm willing to give you a little bit because of a relationship and responsiveness in these things. Jim Anderson calls it tiebreaker selling and thinks you can get a 4% price premium for those things, 3 to 5. But if you want to get more than 5% from the industry average, the value better be more tangible, because by the time it translates from the person using your product back to the chief financial officer, relationship responsiveness doesn't mean much to him. But what does that mean in dollars and cents? So for those of you that hopefully can join us in Hamburg in October, I think it is, this is a short version just because of the time. It's also much more fun when it's interactive than just listening to me go on. But, videos, exercises, and sharing best practices from other industries. In the pharmaceutical or healthcare industry, it's been called total cost of care. I call it total cost of patient care because it helps me remind, but, the same logic. In the renewable space, in the renewable energy space, it's called levelized cost of energy, which is really the price per kilowatt produced. All your OPEX cost and CAPEX cost divided by. So you're starting to see different terms might be used in your industry, but somebody's trying to do a calculation of what's the best value. And as sales, pricing, and marketing people, it's our job to sit together and figure out what is that value and see how we can create it for customers and deliver it and make sure that we get paid for creating that value. So hope to see some of you in October. Thomas, thank you for the opportunity of putting this together. I don't know, do we have any questions or comments or opinions to share? Now I'm scared because I can't hear anything.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Okay.
Yeah, I was actually still on mute.
Okay.
Thanks for that, Todd. One question: do you have experience with measuring emotional value?
The only thing I have there is the Jim Anderson stuff, where they say, the 4% rule, that where in the business world, somebody can come back to their boss and say, either the risk of switch which is create, why move for something? Most people won't move for something less than 4 to 5%. The personal risk, their personal credibility involvement going that way, or the other way. They won't move to you unless there's something more than that. So emotions, relationships, feelings, that 4% range seems to be what his research has shown. People can, I hate to say, get away with. Because remember, that person is going to have to justify to their boss, okay, fine, we're not switching our whatever supplier for 3%. You get a relationship, I know that person, but if it's 20%, your feelings don't matter as much to me anymore.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And another question: are there any examples from the healthcare industry? So I imagine then in your book, do you have any examples from healthcare, or that you would share in October in Hamburg?
Yeah, and just like I said, I won't use names of companies I've done some work with, but real quickly, just out of interest, I didn't realize this. The most expensive real estate in the world is owned by hospitals. And when I was told that once, I'm like, are you serious? Because you think of all the big cities, London, New York, Singapore, Shanghai, the hospitals are there. So if you could put 2 MRI machines into the space where only one used to be, that is everything. You can double your throughput. In a rural hospital, it might not mean as much. A lot of countries are going to pay for performance. Again, I've got a bunch of papers and examples, and if there are people coming to Germany, I can do a little whatever sidebar specifically on medical examples. Pharmaceutical and devices are the 2 examples that I have right away, and health insurance also. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, another question, and actually I was going to ask that myself, but so some customers are afraid to accept value because it's difficult to quantify. So they use cost avoidance or savings as their only measure. So how do you educate those customers? And I guess that kind of goes back to your MAPI slide where you mentioned, well, there are some procurement officers who use TCO methodology, but then some that don't. So for the ones who don't and are maybe not, buying based on value within their own organization, how do you educate, or how do you, even sell not only your product but the concept of value to them?
Yep. Yes. And a few things. I think part of it comes down to timing. Once you're in the bid process and they've given their list of the 7 cost avoidances they're going to accept, and you say, no, look over here. Again, they're taking risks by switching. In some countries, it's illegal to switch the bid requirements after it's been released. So 2 things. I didn't show the slide. The MAPI slide actually is based on research. And if you remember my slide that had that 4 stages, I think we asked approximately 30 questions. Do you measure recycling cost, uptime? I can't remember all the specific ones, but it was looking more holistically. And you can clearly show the people that were measuring all those were more profitable. I use third-party examples like that. So I spend some time with these procurement people that actually reinforce it. Because, me, Todd, I'm a salesperson working for ABB, and I'm telling you to look over here. They're going to have whatever I say, there's going to be 100 questions as why not. But the leading expert in their world, Robert Hanfield's one of them, or these associations say, actually, what they're talking about is right. So the name dropping gives you credibility. Having those people take your message out to the marketplace, having them use your examples is very good. And 2, worst case, I would say, let's have a workshop where we'll walk through what our methodology is, why we believe it, and all these ideas of how we could calculate it, and then give you 1 or 2 examples. Then, then all suppliers should be out here fighting it on who can deliver more of that. Yeah. But again, if it's seen as a sales pitch, they're going to get resistant. And then my final comment there, sorry not to go on too long, but companies that talk about value but don't have a way to guarantee that value, or a pricing model that takes risk in exchange for that value, I tell procurement people that could be just a bunch of PowerPoint slides. If you're telling me how great you are and you want more money up front, but you're not willing to make sure I get some of that value, how much do you really believe it? Because anyone can take a PowerPoint slide and put nice words on it. So, it really is a measurement that says, okay, wait a minute. And a final neat way that I use also, and if you ever get the chance, go spend time with your company's own procurement people And I'm not talking the local buyer that buys the coffee for the office, even though that's very important, but your whatever high-level procurement person, because if your company can buy the same way as you're trying to sell, the credibility is huge. Yeah. And over time, we evolved the way SCAP was buying, because if you're selling one way and buying a different way, you must not believe it. But if it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander. Maybe that's an American saying, but another great tool to use to try to get that message out there.
Yeah. Okay, and then with the time restraints, let's say the last question. So let me read it out. So how much of product value is created by the core offering differentiation versus competition versus the way you approach it?
That would be different by every industry. But when I used, and I won't pull it up right now, but I mean, if you go back to that Accenture slide, I mean, it just gives you an example that 10% of it was the widget, the asset, and 90% of it was in use. And I just think, I mean, again, if you gave two kids or two older people 2 smartphones and said, one's been trained, one knows how to use it, one's been, you know, the knowledge around it, they'll get much more value out of it. Yeah. I mean, and again, 2 people could buy the same product, the same shiv, bearing, belt. Doesn't mean they're going to get the same life out of it. You know, so it's the consulting around it that usually extracts the real value. The question always is, you know, don't give away too much of the knowledge without finding a way to get paid for it. Because if not, customers can cherry pick you all day long. And an example of this, just anybody that's had the pleasure of buying legal services, you know, you're talking about or accounting services or anything, design services, those people won't spend 5 days with you telling you every opportunity to look at every problem, etc., and then say, now please hire me, because you take every one of those ideas and go somewhere else to the person that can deliver it cheaper. But in our day-to-day lives, you want to ask for some ideas, but okay, I believe in it. You've got some examples, and then maybe you're saying, let me get paid based on you realizing more of the value from the product. Yeah. So hopefully that answers it a little bit. I mean, maybe it's not clear 100%.
Yeah. Well, I think an additional comment from the same person, the question is a bit more focused on industrial services.
Well, the industrial one, the gearbox, the industrial plant one there, it says 12% of it's the asset cost and 88% of it is the operating efficiency of it. Now, I mean, I'm going to assume a machine has even if it was run the worst way possible, it was not aligned, it didn't have loads, whatever, however you would do that, there'll be a min and a max. And sometimes you just got to start somewhere, saying we think, or you have some experiences. But even if, as I said, if you could affect the operational effectiveness of the operating cost of that by 2%, hopefully you can do it by 10%. But even 2% would be worth 50% more than a 10% higher price at the beginning. Yeah. And again, to do it, walk the life of it. Ask your salespeople, your experts, to start documenting, what's the best machine producing somewhere in the world. A real quick example, just real quick. Did some work with a petrochemical customer to the exact same pump. They were getting 12.5 to 13 years out of it, mean time between repair. And a big paper customer using the same pump was getting 2.5 years. And when I brought that up to the paper customer, one, they were amazed. They said, we never knew you could do that. So taking best practices from another industry across to a new one, I mean, that's usually where you can find a lot of value. A pump doesn't know if it's in an oil field or if it's in a paper mill or a steel mill in general. Yeah. So having those other references really makes people open up their eyes and go, wow, if you could do it there, maybe you can do that here.
Yeah. Great. Well, Todd, that was the last question for today. So thanks a lot for your time and the presentation. I hope everyone online enjoyed the webinar. If you want to hear more from Todd, again, he'll be hosting the Service Mastery Day session at our 11th Aftermarket Business Platform. So the event will take place at the very beautiful Hotel Atlantic Kempinski. I had the pleasure of being there actually earlier in the week, and it's really amazing. So in Hamburg, October 18 to 20. The theme for the event this year will be how to unleash Service 4.4, and we'll have some fantastic speakers in addition to Todd, other speakers from Caterpillar SKF, Seco Tools, GE Healthcare, and many more. So I'd also like to thank our partners for this year's events at the October events: Navetti, Synchron, XM Reality, OSI Soft, Decide, Tools Group, and Core Systems. Everyone who attended the webinar today should have received the agenda for the upcoming events. And today's webinar has been recorded, so you will receive it in your inbox on Monday. If you're interested in attending the events, we have a special offer in addition to the ongoing early bird. Everyone who signs up by the end of next week will get a free copy of Todd's book, Value First, Then Price. So that concludes the webinar for today. Todd, again, thanks a lot, and I will see you and hopefully everyone in October in Hamburg.
All the best to everyone. Find value, create it, and find a way to get paid for it. Good luck out there.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.